How's everybody doing? It's been a while since I've done a video. I've been away for a little while. Life happens and things, get in the way. So I've been away, but I was hoping that the time I was away, that this indigenous aboriginal nonsense would have dissipated by now. Unfortunately, it seemed like it's picking up steam. And that's dangerous because a lot of our people are being fed disinformation, misinformation. So I'm back again to try to deal with this subject matter. Now, I don't normally name drop. I don't want to do it. But there's an individual who appears to be one of the front leaders, or the leaders in this community of indigenous believers, and his name is Dane Calloway. So I'm going to deal with Dane in this short video. I'm going to deal with 2 points that he makes in this video, and I'm going to debunk them and try to help you understand why he says the things that he says in his videos. Now, I'm not hating on Dane. I can see why he's popular. He produces very good videos. They seem to be well thought out, very informative. The quality of his videos are done very well. I can see why he attracts the audience that he attracts. Unfortunately, the people who like Dane Calloway do not do research. And you know why I know they don't do research? Because if they did research, they would not buy into the nonsense that he is spewing. Okay? All right. So the first thing I want to deal with that he mentions in his video, I believe he says, or videos, but he makes this claim that 95% or 98% of African Americans are indigenous Americans. Now, the first question I have for Dane is, how do you know that? What evidence have you produced to demonstrate that that is in fact the case? Out of all the videos I watched, and it was very difficult to watch the videos because of the information that he was putting out there, he never gave you any evidence to support that 98 or 95% of African Americans are indigenous. Okay, so what he suggests is that our history was told in reverse. The slave trade actually happened in reverse. That indigenous Americans were shipped to shipped to Africa, and then recycled back to America. And there are several incidents in history that gives him a reason to make this claim. The first incident in history was when Columbus came to the New World and he took natives back to Spain. So he's trying to suggest that, see, they went over to Europe and then they were maybe recycled into Africa somehow. The other couple of incidents have to deal with the free slaves that were sent to Liberia and Sierra Leone. They make the claim that those individuals were indigenous Americans. Okay? So he makes that connection because he also knows that the science suggests that African Americans have similar DNA to Africans, West Africans primarily. So how does he bridge that issue? He bridged it by suggesting that indigenous people were sent to Africa, changed the gene pool in Africa, and they were recycled back to the Americas. Now, the one thing, because indigenous people don't believe in science, it would take many generations to change the gene pool. Now, I have a graph. If you look on African American population, go online, Google this, African American populations in the 1700s. And I have a graph right here, And it shows that in the 1700s, the average population of West African groups was about 75 million. Okay? Now, keep in mind what I said, or what Dane said, that indigenous Americans were sent to Africa and then recycled back to the Americas. That would explain similar DNA. Okay? But think about the number 75 million. It would take more than at least 100 to 200 million indigenous Americans to change the gene pool in Africa. You follow what I'm saying? Now, Dane mentioned in the video that he could find these numbers, but he doesn't have the money to find the numbers. So he can't tell you how many indigenous Americans were sent to Africa because he doesn't have the finances to get the numbers. Dane, let me save you the trouble. It would take you at least 100 to 200 million indigenous Americans to change the gene pool in Africa. So that would account for the similarities that African Americans have with Africans. Now, Dean, even if you had the numbers of 200 million, can you provide the slave ships that they were used to send those individuals back to Africa? How many slave ships did it take to send millions and millions of indigenous Americans back to Africa? Where are the ships, Dane? Can you provide me 1, 2, 3 ships? No, you can't. Because you know that's because you know this whole theory of yours is BS. And you know it. And anybody that believes that nonsense, you're an idiot as well. So I'm going to put that one to rest. Okay. Now I want to deal with this issue of African American, the term African American. Dane suggests that amongst other indigenous believers, that the term African Americans didn't come into existence, so Jesse Jackson brought it out, introduced it to the people. In other words, suggesting that we didn't know we were African until Jesse told us we were African. And that's when we discovered we were African. Now, I was watching a video on Sonetta TV, and I know you indigenous people, crap on Sonetta TV, but listen. In my opinion, there's some buffoonery on Sonetta TV, but a lot of it is very informative information, and they have a lot of intellectual people on his platform. Okay, so if you flat out diss Sonetta TV, Black News 102, then you're not being fair. You're being biased. Okay? So I was on Sonetta TV and I ran across a brother from the Amon Ra squad, Ankh. And he dropped a jewel that I didn't even know. He went to the Yale, let me see if I can pull it up. The Yale University magazine, or no, it's called the Yale Alumni magazine. And he typed in the origin of African American. And guess what? It goes back to the 18th century. Okay? And it was first used in a sermon. Let me read most of this. Okay, let me just read this so I get it right. Most of us became familiar with the word African American in the 1980s when Jesse Jackson began to popularize it as an alternative to black. The ethnonym is a name by which an ethnic or racial group is known. By the term is much older than that. Recently, I found an example dating back to the early days of the American Republic. The Oxford Dictionary traced the documented occurrence of the African American back as far as 1835. The related term Afro-American, which enjoyed a brief popularity in the 1960s, has an 1831 citation in the OED, but last April I did a routine search for a phrase in an American historical newspaper and the Redex company, very powerful database of early U.S. papers, and it was surprised to be led to a 1782 sermon published in Philadelphia. So you can read, you can look it up. Just go to the YaleUniversityMagazine.com. When you get on the site, you enter origin of African American, and you'll see it. You'll see the term being used as early as 1782 in a sermon. So black people back then were calling themselves African American, or referred to themselves as African American. In other words, they knew who they were. Okay? So, Dane, stop the lying. Now, there's another brother who was born a slave. His name was Richard Allen. Look him up. Look him up. He's the person who's responsible for starting the African Methodist Episcopalian Church, AME Church. Richard Allen, a former slave. Now, think about this. If he thought that he was indigenous, why would he refer to himself and his people as African? Stop lying to our people, Dane. Stop lying to our people. Now, I'm just going to, like I said, I'm just going to touch on 2 incidents today. I could go on. But I feel like, I'm getting a little agitated because it bothers me that, our people are being lied to and being deceived. So I'm coming after you, Dane. And I'm coming after a lot of you out there who's feeding our people a bunch of garbage. So stay tuned, people.